The countdown trailer for Christopher Nolan's Odyssey has an estimated 300,000 dislikes, 6 times its likes, because a Greek prince said the word daddy. It's become the most mocked line of 2026, proof, supposedly, that Christopher Nolan turned Homer into a teen drama. So we did something almost nobody in the comment section did. We opened the translations. Richmond Lattimore, 1965. The translation your classics professor swears by. Book 6, Daddy Dear, Will You Not Have Them Harness Me the Wagon? Robert Fagles, 1996, the translation that sold over 1 million copies, same scene. Daddy Dear, I wonder, won't you have them harness a wagon for me? More than a century ago, a Harvard professor rendered the same line Papa Dear. That's because ancient Greek actually had the word papus, nursery speech, the word a child called their father. Now, the honest asterisk. In Homer, it's the Princess Nausicaa, sweet-talking her father into lending her the wagon. It's affectionate, not an insult. Nolan hands the word to a sneering suitor as a weapon. That specific venom is his invention. So the internet's proof of dumbing down is, verbatim, the most respected Homer scholarship of the last century. And that's the point of this video. Every controversy around this film is a claim about the book. So before it releases, we're testing all of them against what Homer actually wrote. Here's a stranger one. The most iconic image in every trailer, the Trojan horse, isn't in the Odyssey. It isn't in the Iliad either, which ends before the war does, with Troy still standing. The horse belongs to other poems in the ancient Trojan cycle, poems that survive only in fragments. The Little Iliad, the Sack of Troy. The Odyssey shows it exactly one way, as a song. Years after the war, a disguised Odysseus sits in a foreign king's hall and asks the court bard to sing of the horse of wood, even the guileful thing that goodly Odysseus led up into the citadel. The bard sings his greatest victory back to him, and Odysseus breaks. The heart of Odysseus melted, and the tear wet his cheeks beneath the eyelids, and nobody at the table notices except the king. That's how Homer handles Troy, not as spectacle, but as a memory that ambushes the man who survived it. So when Nolan opens his film inside the horse, soldiers breathing through straws as water floods in, he's making Troy present tense in a way Homer never did. The verdict cuts both ways. The placement is un-Homeric, but the content is Homer's own flashback, finally shown instead of sung. And Nolan's connection runs deeper than fandom. Warner Brothers originally hired him to direct Troy, the 2004 film, then handed it to another director. He's been carrying this image of a half-sunken, waterlogged horse ever since. Now for the biggest change nobody's arguing about, because it's real. Homer's Odyssey opens on Mount Olympus, with Zeus complaining out loud. Lo you now, how vainly mortal men do blame the gods. The gods aren't metaphors in this poem, they're characters with dialogue. Athena keeps stepping into the story in person. She walks into Ithaca disguised as a sea captain, travels beside Telemachus wearing a family friend's face, and finally drops the disguise entirely. Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, who am always by thee, and guard thee in all adventures, that reveal, to Odysseus' face, is the emotional heart of the whole poem. Poseidon is even more physical. He personally spots Odysseus' raft from a mountaintop, announces his grudge out loud, then gathers the clouds, grasping his trident in his hands. Nolan is cutting all of that. No robed figures, no Olympus. In his words, to people in that period, evidence of gods was everywhere, so his Poseidon arrives as weather, not as a man. You want the audience to be on the boat with them. Fearing the wrath of Poseidon, the storm is the god. As pure cinema, that's a coherent, even beautiful choice. But understand what it costs. If Athena never says I am always by thee, if she's reduced to omens and coincidence, the poem's central friendship loses its voice, which makes Zendaya's Athena the single most interesting unknown in this film. How do you play a goddess who is never allowed to appear? The loudest controversy is the casting of Helen, so let's do the one thing the argument never does, and read her scenes. First, the famous epithet is real, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. Book 22, one line, the goddess Athena, invoking the war fought for highborn Helen of the white arms. That's the textual evidence, one formulaic epithet of the kind Homer hands out to half the women in the poem. Here's what the argument misses. Helen barely exists in the Odyssey. She appears in exactly 2 scenes, both in Sparta, hosting a dinner party. She never goes near Troy in this poem's present tense. But those 2 scenes are some of the sharpest writing in Homer, because Helen and Menelaus tell the same war in 2 incompatible versions. Helen's story stars a loyal Helen. When Odysseus snuck into Troy disguised as a beggar, I alone knew him in that guise. And, she says, she kept his secret and helped him. Her husband answers with a different memory. The night the Greeks hid inside the horse, thrice thou didst go round about the hollow ambush, making thy voice like the voices of the wives of all the Argives, Helen, trying to lure them out to their deaths. Same dinner, same marriage, 2 Helens, and Homer, pointedly, never tells you which one is true. Oh, and before the story starts, she drugs the wine, a potion to bring forgetfulness of every sorrow so nobody has to feel anything. Homer's Helen is not a beauty standard. She's the poem's most unreliable narrator. And the dual casting everyone scrolled past is the actually interesting choice. The same actress plays Clytemnestra, the queen who murdered her returning husband. Because that pairing is how the poem itself thinks. Agamemnon's ghost spends 2 separate scenes contrasting the faithful wife with the murderous one. So good was the wisdom of constant Penelope, the fame of her virtue shall never perish, while his own wife devised ill deeds and slew her wedded lord. One face for the war's cause, and the homecoming's nightmare, whatever you think of the casting, that idea is running on Homer's logic. Here's the twist for film fans. Everyone assumed the director of Memento would carve Homer into puzzle pieces. Plot twist, Homer got there first. Everything you think of as the Odyssey, the Cyclops, Circe, the Sirens, Homer doesn't show you any of it directly. Books 9 through 12 are a story Odysseus tells at that same foreign banquet, in first person, years later. It starts with the most famous self-introduction in literature. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, who am in men's minds for all manner of wiles, and my fame reaches unto heaven. And Homer keeps reminding you it's a performance, mid-underworld. Odysseus pauses to tell the king, there is a time for many words, and there is a time for sleep. A man narrating his own legend to strangers, deciding what to include. Homer invented the unreliable epic 28 centuries before cinema. And Nolan knows it. In his words, the story is written in a non-linear way. It's the original kind of non-linear narrative. Cinema's most famous non-linear director didn't have to bend Homer into a signature shape. The shape was Homer's all along. Quick verdicts on everything else the trailers show. Penelope, the strategist. In the text, she strings the suitors along for 3 years by weaving a burial shroud by day and secretly unraveling it by night. In the daytime, she would weave the mighty web, and in the night, unravel the same. If the film makes her clever, that's not modernization, that's the book. Robert Pattinson's smug suitor Antinomus, canonical. In Book 1, he's already sneering that Telemachus should never be king, and in Book 22, he's the first to die, an arrow through the throat mid-sip of wine. If the movie keeps that death, it's fidelity, not fan service. The dog. Yes, Argos is real, and Homer gives him one short paragraph. The old hound recognizes his disguised master after 20 years, wags his tail, hasn't the strength to move, and dies even in the hour that he beheld Odysseus again. If Nolan expands the dog, we'll allow it. Circe, humanized per the press. In the text, she turns the crew into pigs, loses one duel of wits, and then hosts them for a full year and hands Odysseus the sailing plan that saves his life. The humanizing is already halfway done. And that R rating everyone's surprised by, Book 22 mutilates a man, cut off his nostrils and his ears with the pitiless sword, and hangs the disloyal maids whose feet writhed, for a little space but for no long while. The R rating might be the most faithful adaptation choice in the entire film. So, the scorecard before anyone's seen the film. The daddy line, in the translations for 60 years. The horse, Homer's own flashback, moved to present tense. The gods as storms, the one genuinely radical change, and Nolan says so himself. Helen, 2 scenes, 2 versions of her, and a poem that cares what she did, not what she looked like. The structure, the loom, the suitor, the dog, the gore, Homer, all the way down. What we can't score yet, whether the ending keeps the reunion test, what happens to Athena without her reveal, and how much of books 9 through 12 survives it all, that verdict needs the actual film. The moment it's out, we're doing the full book versus movie autopsy, scene by scene. Subscribe so you're here for it. And if you want to walk into the theater already knowing the whole story, The full Odyssey primer is on screen now.